Hi, I'm Steve Porcaro for Starlix, and welcome to my video. What we're going to be dealing with today is my approach, some of my approaches to synthesis and synthesizers and sequencers, and I want to let you know that these approaches are my own, and they're ones I've learned from various sources, but they're my own techniques, and everyone has their own way of doing things, and I encourage that. And these are some of the techniques that I use. What we're going to be covering today, amongst other things, is MIDI routing, some basic drum machine programming. We're going to cover some different techniques of sequencing and using sequencers. And we'll hit some sounds. We'll cover some a basic bass sound. We'll do a basic trumpet sound. And we'll cover some all-around synth basics. But first, let me give you a brief rundown of the actual devices here we'll be dealing with. There's the MIDI routing box, where all the ins and outs, the MIDI ins and outs of the various MIDI devices, be them sequencers or keyboards, all come together and are routing. I'm able to direct the MIDI signal to and from the various devices, sometimes simultaneously. As far as a master keyboard controller goes, I'll be using today my KX88, which is capable of a myriad of MIDI functions as far as control goes in regards to volume, modulation, pitch, etc. And we'll be talking later on how that comes in handy, where different MIDI instruments sometimes respond differently as far as controllers go, and the KX88 helps as far as that goes. Also, sequencer-wise, well, I'll be using the 9000, the Linn 9000. And I'll share how that helps me in a very much a compositional way that helps me compose. And also there's the MC-500 that I use as a sequencer. And that has features that are very unique to itself, as does the Oberheim DSX. And what you'll see is that each of these three different sequencers, they all do something unique, and I somehow, what I try to do is pull them all together and have them, I like to use them all just for their strengths. And let's see, synthesizer-wise, we'll be dealing with an Oberheim Xpander, as far as getting a little trumpet sound goes, which gives me a lot of flexibility as far as an analog synthesizer under digital control goes. As far as something very basic, we will touch upon the good old Minimoog there as far as a basic bass sound goes. And there's, for some reason, you'll see how that just gets a sound and does things that nothing else can do for me. Also, I'll be using my TX816 racks, which essentially are a DX7, rather 8 DX7s, all combined into one unit, one rack unit. And as far as the sampler goes, for an overall keyboard sampler, I use the Emulator IIs, usually in conjunction with a string sound, and sometimes just to give me the transient that's missing from most analog or even FM type synthesizer sounds. You know, computers are used an awful lot these days, and whereas I don't use them so much personally myself, I do use them occasionally, especially for when it comes to running patch librarian programs to assist me with my DXs and things like that. And a lot of sequencers also work very well for storing programs, and they're essentially computers themselves. You know, a lot of people don't put enough importance, it seems to me, on the way they organize all their MIDI information. And, you know, if we look at just exactly what MIDI is, which is the method by which all the instruments talk to each other, right? Musical instrument digital interface, the way they speak to each other and communicate to each other. When you get into a system with multiple MIDI devices, you really have to have a way of organizing all that information that's running around. And the way I do that is with this MIDI box here. I use a psychologic MIDI box, which is a, it's where the inputs and outputs, MIDI-wise, of all these instruments and devices are all hooked up. And what I have is I have a matrix where I'm able to send one device to another device. And I like to use the jargon that they use, which is source and destination. The output, the MIDI output of an instrument is means that that's a source of MIDI, and if something receives MIDI or has a MIDI input, that's a destination. Okay, a typical example of a source of MIDI would be a keyboard, a MIDI keyboard, where when you play the keys, that information is sent out in packets out of the MIDI output. And let me see, something that's simultaneously a source and destination would be a sequencer, where it takes incoming MIDI signals and also puts out MIDI signals at the same time. Some people wonder why a device like an Oberheim Xpander module would be a source of MIDI. Well, all the data, the sounds, and sometimes some of the actual control data can be passed out of the MIDI output and saved via computer to disk and so forth. You know, I'll tell you what we're going to do. What we'll do is a quick demonstration is I'll just take this, this MIDI source here, which is the KX88 keyboard, and I'll assign it. I'll assign it to the Oberheim Xpander. As you see now, it's not making a sound, but once I send that source to that destination, I have control of it. And simultaneously, I can also send that same source to a different destination. Simultaneously, if I want. The TX Rex. I'm able to control them both simultaneously with the volume pedal, which is nice, not to have any special interfaces between the equipment.